All right, happy Monday, everybody. Kenny Lamons here with Medicare Millennials, where we chronicle our journey to building hopefully a large, successful Medicare book of business. And today I've got a special guest. Some of you may already know him. He's got a great online presence, but if you don't, this is Christian Brindle, his channel Six Figure Medicare. And we actually recently met. I reached out to him because I watch a lot of his channel. I'm in his Facebook group. And I just think he brings a different dimension to a Medicare agent as far as value than I do. So I reached out to him and he was gracious enough to sit down and talk with me today. And maybe we can give anyone watching a little different perspective than what I bring. Christian, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Kenny. It's always a pleasure and a privilege. So thank you for having me. I love what you do. I love your channel. I think you're doing great things for agents out there. I think you and I can both agree there's not enough training out there, good training, quality training. Basically my name, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Christian Brindle. I've been a Medicare agent since 2014. I started in the business when I was 20, 21, somewhere in there. I hit six figures for the first time when I was 25, which I do believe if I knew what I knew today, I could have got there a lot faster than that. But, getting in so young, there was a lot of growth and learning that I needed to go through, along the way. I do a lot of different things. I run a Facebook group called Six Figure Medicare Agent, and it's closing in on 1,000 members in about 6 months. Maybe more like 5 months. I don't know, to be frank.
If you're not in that group, you need to request access because I get
Yes.
a lot of value out of that group.
Thank you, my friend. We love the group. It's a great community, and there's some straight up killers in there. There's people that make $10 million a year in the Medicare business in that organization. There's FMOs in there. You name it, there's someone in there, call center owners and stuff like that. It's a fantastic community and we just love it. I run a YouTube channel called Six Figure Medicare Agent that puts out trainings for that group primarily. They're tied together. I've kind of built a bit of an online presence in terms of the Medicare community, whether it be on the agent side or on the beneficiary side. So that's kind of my background a little bit. And yeah.
So in the just kind of following you online, but then in our short conversations, I know that you've done a lot in a short amount of time. I mean, this is your sixth, seventh year in the business, right?
Yeah, 6 year.
6 year in the business, and you're like you just mentioned, you have a big influence on agents, but you're also on the ground. You sell Medicare policies. You're building a brand both for consumer-facing Medicare beneficiaries as well alongside with what you've done with the agent and agency side. So I think that's where me and you differ quite a bit. Is I really am in the early stages of my brand building for consumers and to generate business and to build my book. And I've always been more of a leads guy and a systems guy. So I just love all the things that you do to generate business. Small disclaimer, I'm not being hypocritical. I'm still a believer that a brand new agent needs to find a lead source and start there. But I think Christian can help shed some light on the things that are possible to grow beyond that. So I don't know, Christian, maybe just tell us like one of the first things you started doing to brand build and generate traffic that way, and what kind of success did you have early on versus a traditional sit in a Walmart kiosk or buy a lead model?
Right, for sure. And I agree with your sentiment there, Kenny, 110%. I have new agents that will come and work with us and they want to contract with us, and they're going to and sometimes they'll want to jump right in like brand new, and they'll want to try to do the brand building content that we do. And I'm just like, it's not realistic. You need to, I think there's levels to this. And I think you have to kind of get through that first stage first, which is, get your feet up under you, learn what you're doing, get some apps under your belt. And then, as time goes on, I think you can kind of focus on kind of brand building and scaling a little bit more and that kind of stuff. But to answer your question about kind of the first thing I did, the first thing I ever did was in 2018, I started a podcast for Medicare beneficiaries. And at the time, there was probably 5 Medicare podcasts total on the internet. It wasn't a huge thing, but there was one podcast in particular that I kind of had my sights set on called Medicare Nation. And I was seeing the kind of traffic that podcast was getting, and it was insane. Like they had like 130 plus reviews on Apple Podcasts. And I'm like, are that many people on Medicare listening to this? Like, there's no way, like that's kind of always the stereotype with people on Medicare, right? They're not on the internet. They're not on social media. They don't listen to podcasts, but it's so wrong. I've learned. So I started doing a podcast, just kind of as a way I felt to try to try something. I didn't really know what it was going to be. It started out incredibly inconsistent. So we were doing like we were trying to do one episode a week, but it was more like one episode every 2 weeks, sometimes every 3 weeks. And it's just kind of wishy-washy and that kind of stuff. But what I learned was when we started doing it consistently every week, one episode a week or one every 2 weeks, or whenever we stuck to that schedule, I saw the engagement in the audience go up quite a bit. And I was like, maybe there's something to this. So I started being very disciplined. I started doing it every week for about a year. And before I knew it, once a week turned into twice a week. And then twice a week turned into 3 times a week. And then we've kind of drawn it back a little bit now to only once a week again. But we have over 200 episodes. It's closing in on about 50,000 downloads on the audio platform alone. It's on 25 different websites, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify, to Stitcher, to Google Casts, you name it. It's probably on there. And that was something that blew my mind, because probably I'd say after about doing it consistently for about a year, we started seeing business come in and leads come in from various different places. And it kind of forced us to branch into different states. We went from being licensed in 2 states to being licensed in 10. And we write business on a consistent basis from the podcast every month, just about. It's been a fantastic brand building tool for us. And I'd say that's probably what most of the agents knew me as, and they knew me by, before we even started our Facebook group. Most agents, that were new in the business, that were trying to learn about Medicare, would go listen to the podcast to kind of learn, okay, what are the products that I'm selling? Like, what's the ins and outs of this kind of stuff? So it kind of had quite a few new agents listening to it as well, but as well as beneficiaries. So that was something we did early on. Now, fast forward to today, there's probably, I've probably seen 30 plus Medicare podcasts trying to kind of replicate what I do and what we've done. But none have been able to kind of get the attention that ours has gotten. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but that's the main thing that we started out doing.
That brings up a ton of questions in my mind.
Yeah.
No, that's, first of all, congratulations. That's being bold and trying, entering, not that podcasts are a new space, but like you mentioned, there's certainly a new or even ignored space when you think of seniors. People imagine that, and obviously that wasn't the case. A couple of questions that come to mind. Number one, of course, the Medicare world. So content, that wasn't difficult. Like, what would my seniors that are either already on Medicare or new to Medicare want to know? I could see that part probably wasn't that difficult. Mm-hmm. But as far as once you get the content on there, my concern would be, how are these people going to find me? How are they finding this podcast? Is it word of mouth? Is it Google search? Is it, how did you're putting the content out, you're waiting to get some traffic, but to me, I don't see how you know where that traffic's going to come from or anything like that.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a great question. And I think a couple different layers to the answer. So at first, I had no clue where the traffic would come from. I really had no idea. I was just kind of throwing something against the wall and seeing if it would stick. Primarily, what we started doing was, what I found is, by having us diversify the content and making sure that it was able to be broadcast to multiple different channels, I kind of learned that there were seniors that would actually seek out the content. They would basically, there might, and believe it or not, there's actually quite a few seniors that listen to podcasts on a regular basis. And it's not that hard to believe, I don't think, because I think seniors kind of come up in a day and age where, they listen to the radio, and they listen to radio shows and stuff like that on the way to work, and they have a particular channel they tune into and that kind of stuff. So podcasting is kind of just an evolution of radio, if you think about it. And so I think a lot of seniors, probably a lot more than people realize, look at it in that regard, and that was the approach I took. I wanted our show to kind of be like a radio show. And I'm a huge fan of old radio guys, like content creators and things like that. Like I'm a huge Stern fan. Love me some Stern, some Howard Stern. And so I would study these different radio guys and try to find ways to draw them in. But one thing I learned probably about a year in is if I had agents come on as guests on my podcast, even though it was consumer based, because we all know how algorithms work. If it's getting eyeballs, it's going to be pushed in front of someone else. And so one thing that helped me out really early on, even before I had my Facebook group, is I kind of rubbed shoulders and linked arms with people that were way above me in terms of familiarity in the industry. So I think the first person I interviewed that was a really big name on my podcast was Justin Brock. And at the time it broke records for my personal downloads. And it helped me show up, in different searches and Google searches and things like that. And then I was like, there's something to this. So I've had tons of huge names on the industry on that show to talk about something that's really a consumer-based audience, and I would do something that most people weren't probably willing to do. I would let them plug their agency. And we've had people come on the show and get clients and business and write apps from being on my show that I probably could have gotten, but I gave it up to them because I wanted to borrow their attention a little bit. Right. And so because of that, I think we got some consumers that would pay attention to us that wouldn't normally. We had some agents pay attention to us that wouldn't normally. And in my opinion, eyeballs are eyeballs. The more eyeballs I'm getting, the more the algorithms and the Google searches are going to push my content in front of someone's eyeballs. And so I figured that out. We had people on like Galen Hendricks. We had Tony Merwin, Joe Trottola, Joanna Wyckoff, all people that I've gotten to know quite a bit. We had Cody Askins on. Cody Askins is not going to probably come on and share a bunch of insight for beneficiaries, but it's a big name. Yeah. Right. So I just tried to have people on that would get eyeballs and get attention. And I think that's kind of where I saw the views and the attention and the downloads really start to spike at that point.
Wow. That's a kind of something you just stumbled upon, probably thought it would be cool to interview someone, and then it just clicked, right? So that makes a lot of sense. So the second question on the back end of the podcast, okay? So you're gaining traction, you have good traffic, that's excellent. Now, how do you mitigate the traffic? How did you, what was your call to action for a beneficiary to reach out to you if they wanted? And how, let's just say that was via phone call. Like, were you fielding all of these phone calls? Did you have a voicemail box, a VA, a personal assistant, or was it through email, website, right? So what was your call to action, and how did you make sure you were able to handle any influx of leads that came in?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. So I would say that what we did was really simple. I've seen other people do podcasts where they'll put in this ridiculous bio, and it's like a book, and I mean, maybe that's just me, but I feel like most people feel the same way. I'm not going to read all that shit, excuse my French. I don't know if I can curse on this, but
it's wild.
But that's my first reaction when I'm reading when I'm in a podcast, and if I even glance at the bio and it's this big long thing, I'm not going to read that. What I did was, old school in terms of what old school, coming back to radio a little bit, what old school radio guys would do is when they're plugging something, or if they're reading an advertisement, they're just going to read it on the air and it's going to get attention. Right. What I would do is at the beginning of different episodes and at the end, I'd kind of experiment with it. Sometimes in the middle, I would basically, give myself a little bit of a plug. Hey, if you're on Medicare and you're in these amount of states, typically on every episode, what I do now is I'll say something along the lines of, if you live in the states of blah, 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 and I'll list off the states that we're licensed in. I'll be like, give us a call, and I'll just read our office number on the podcast. And I'll be like, if you're more comfortable shooting me an email, you're welcome to do that too. So I give my email address out. I've given out our website before. People have gone on our website looking for information. And I basically just talk about it. I just talk about it. I give the phone number out there. Now, in terms of handling the phone calls, I mean, it wasn't difficult because our office has staff. We have staff that answer the phones anyway during the day. And so when somebody calls in, there's going to be someone there to answer the phone regardless. It's not like it's not like I really had like a specific person lined up and be like, all right, we're launching this podcast and we're expecting this many calls from it or anything like that. It's just, we would see calls come in throughout the regular flow of the day. And just our office, business model in general is we want someone that's going to be there to answer the phone. And that was basically from there, and they'd get their information. They'd pass it on to me just like it would for a referral or something like that. And that's basically as complicated as it got. We kept it very simple.
Yeah. And I think these are the kind of questions I like to ask, because that paints a picture of where we were just talking about, kind of walk before you run. The beauty of a lead is that even though they responded to some form of advertisement, so they are responding to what you put out there, it is still at that point when they've made a decision, they're interested in whatever you put out there. It's still a new agent's responsibility to now go readdress that lead, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you show up and knock on their door, call them and set an appointment, whatever the situation may be. Once you go into brand building and you're attracting that traffic to you, you are in a position where you have staff to help you funnel that traffic down, right? You weren't just walking into an appointment and missing a call from some state 3 states away that would have been an awesome new to Medicare deal for you. You had the things in place to handle that from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Now, 100%. And I'm not arguing that to do brand building or have a podcast, you need to have an office and staff. I'm arguing that if you didn't have an office and staff, you would have had to have planned ahead to how you were going to handle any inbound traffic, right? You would have set up a separate phone number. You would have told them to leave a voicemail in a voicemail box and you get right back. Some other plan to handle that. And these are the things I want newer agents or agents that are just looking to kind of level up to think through when they look at guys like you. And they see like awesome things that you're doing or the Justin Brocks of the world are doing, but they don't get realistic expectations on how did you get there, right? And so I love this. I love what you just put out right there.
Yeah. And I'd like, if I can add something to that, I'd love to. I 100% agree with that, because there's nothing that frustrates me more than, if we'll contract a brand new agent that is just maybe even newly licensed, we'll have someone want to work with us. And and then, a week from then, while they're in the middle of certifications or whatever the case might be, they're like, well, hey, I saw Justin Brock wrote like 50 apps last week. How do I do that? And I'm like, I think what people don't see for guys like him, and Justin's a friend, and I have just immense respect for him and everything that he's done. But I think what people don't see is, they're not seeing that it took him a long time to get to this point to where, he's spending obscene amounts of money, for most agents anyway, in their eyes, on advertising, on TV commercials, Facebook ads. I mean, his face is plastered everywhere within a 50-mile radius of his office. Yeah. And so he has that inbound lead funnels and traffic just coming to him based on his investments and his efforts that he's put up over the years. And a new agent's not going to come right in unless you had some prior business success and you have some money in the bank and drop 10 grand on some advertisement and have people come in the door. I mean, when you're a new agent, like when I first started, I was cold calling Turning 65 list, trying to sell Medicare supplements. I had nobody calling me, no interest for me. I had to basically generate my own business. I had to schedule appointments. I had to go door knock leads. I had to, old leads at that. And that's kind of, that's how I really built my business at the beginning. And I don't think agents see that. I think they see the finished product and they don't take into consideration, okay, what do I need to get there to get to that point where I can make it easier on yourself? Because I think part of the point of growing an agency and scaling is growing to the point where you can make it easy on yourself,
Exactly.
to where you can spend money on advertisement and have the business come to you, if you will. But you're not going to start off doing that. I don't know anybody that ever has.
Yeah. And a big part of this, we know that Medicare is a largely renewal based business, right? That's really the ultimate goal. I focused more on final expense early on, and I did Medicare supplements, but the volume wasn't there. And so I was able to get to six figures pretty early on. I think I was like 26, a little older than you were. But that wasn't mostly renewal income, okay? So that's when I learned to make the shift towards focusing on Medicare, because I realized I didn't want to do that level of work just to hit six figures year in and year out over time.
Yeah.
But I
Hamster
say
wheel.
all of, sorry, go ahead.
Hamster wheel.
Yeah, hamster wheel. I didn't want to be caught in that. Well, I say all of that to say now, as I've laid a foundational renewal base, it seems every month, but certainly every quarter, every half a year, as that renewal income grows, I feel more comfortable spending more money on these other avenues, or more importantly, spending the time in these other avenues to generate that brand building, to hopefully for it to lead to inbound traffic. And it's an evolution. So I think we're painting a good expectation for new agents to have a plan that they can execute with the realistic expectation of over time building that brand when they have that renewal income to help support them, right? So
Yeah. I agree completely. I mean, I probably started doing all of this stuff, when I had, I don't know, 7-8 grand a month in renewals coming in. Like that was when I started the process
yeah.
of even, putting focus on the brand building. I mean, like I said at the beginning of the interview, I think there's levels to this. And I think anytime someone wants to come right into the business and leapfrog some of those levels, they're going to be set up for a little bit of disappointment in their expectations. I think you got to build the business first. You got to have some money coming in. You need to know that money's going to come in next month, to spend the money. Or, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea to spend a little bit of your time, every month on a blog or something, that can maybe bring in some business or help you get found online or something like that, when you're newer in the business. But I think to put all your chips on the table for that right off the bat and just be like, I'm not going to work leads, or I'm not going to I'm not going to dial, I'm not going to make calls, it's beneath me. It's just not a good attitude, and it's just not the way to go about it. And I just think, like all my new agent, I mean, all the agents that contract with me that are newer, I'm not teaching them to build a brand. I'm teaching them that later. I want them to learn the fundamentals first. I want them to cut their teeth a little bit. I want them to work leads. I want them to make calls. I want them to go on appointments. I want them to build a business first, and then you can start figuring out how to make your business more famous, if you will.
So because I always try to keep these fairly short. I think we put out a lot of good information, but right here at the end, if you could, let's say we've got a new agent, okay, brand new. They're going to focus on a lead source. What are a couple of things that they could do early on, like you mentioned, a blog, referral partners, whatever that may be, just to dip their feet in it and start learning it without taking away from the fundamentals. And then B, if you've got somebody closer to where I'm at, or somewhere past a new agent at least, what would be some of the first things you would focus on from a brand building perspective? So I guess that's two questions: the new agent, and then I haven't been doing this 20 years, but I've got my feet under me. What can I start doing to build a brand?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with the new agent. I would say, I'd say something that new agents should be doing that I wish I was doing earlier on. Two things. I think the first thing is, obviously you got to spend money on your business if you're able to, and I personally barely spent any money on my business for the first couple of years, and that's a huge regret I have. Like I remember my first AEP, I had a bunch of money coming in January, like every Medicare agent does. I have a really good friend of mine that's from Malaysia, and he went back to see his family. I went with him. Trip cost me a fortune.
All of it.
Yeah, I mean, it cost me a ton of money. I bought my girlfriend an engagement ring, who's now my wife. I mean, I don't regret any of those things, but I spent so much money on that trip, and I look back on it today, and I'm like, how much further along would I be today if I was, you know, if I had 10 grand come in or 15 grand come in, and I was putting that money even into like maybe direct mail, you know, I mean, direct mail, tried and true. I mean, it's not sexy, but direct mail works, I mean, for new agents particularly. Um, so I think investing in your business where you can, like reinvesting your commissions is huge. I think you got to take some percentage. I mean, it doesn't have to be a ton, but invest back into your business. Don't just expect to build a monster business without spending money. So I think there is that. And it doesn't have to be running Facebook ads or brand building or anything like that. I think just buying leads in general is what you need to be doing. And so that's a regret I have. That's number one. Number two, you mentioned, networking. I think if I had taken my networking as serious as I do today, I think that would help me have had more referral partners earlier on. We have great referral partners now. We probably have 10 people in the state of Utah that I'm off the top of my head that are car insurance agents, financial planners, um, you know, Obama marketplace agents, under 65 agents, just different people that I know. Some of them are clients, some of them aren't clients, but they're people that run their own practice and they send their referrals to me for Medicare, um, just in our state, and I have some people that are out of state too that send me referrals for a bunch of different states. So networking is huge. That's something you can do that's grassroots, that's free. Um, so that's what I'd say for the new agents. Those are the things you should be focused. A couple things anyway. I mean, there's a lot of things, but now in terms of for someone like yourself, Kenny, I mean, you built up a business. You're becoming successful, which is great. Um, I would say, I would say, if it was me and I had to start from scratch, I would basically put my attention into building a brand on YouTube, Google, Facebook, those kind of platforms, and kind of pumping some money into that and kind of getting myself a little bit more known. We've just recently started doing some ads on YouTube. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing, you know? Like I talked to someone who's a very, very successful marketer, and he's like, YouTube ads is, basically YouTube ads are Google AdWords, and on a different platform. And he's like, they're so complicated. You should just pay someone to do it for you. I'm like, I'm like, I want to learn this. I want to figure this out. I want to know how to do this. I figured out Facebook ads. I know what I'm doing there. Now I want to learn this. So I think, if you can use these social platforms to push, a huge amount of your clients and customers are going to be on Google, YouTube, and Facebook.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, that's technical, practical advice right there that somebody can take and start to learn one piece at a time. And I think when you say, Facebook, Google, YouTube, these are all excellent platforms to utilize for your brand building. Like you just said, I learned Facebook ads. Now I'm learning YouTube ads. Mm-hmm. Take it one piece at a time, just like you do anything else. You don't eat an elephant in one bite.
Right.
So yeah, that's huge. I love it. Well, look, Christian, one last question for you. You hit six figures when you were 25 years old or somewhere right around that range. What was it like when you first hit that? For most people, right, even if your goal is 7 figures, 8 figures eventually, step one is just most people never even hit 6 figures. So when you did that, what was that like? And, any insight onto that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the year before I was close. I was in the 90s, low 90s or something like that. And it was always a target of mine. It was always a goal of mine. Like even before I was in insurance, I was in some multi-level marketing thing, I was like 19 in a multi-level marketing thing. And that was always kind of the dream, to hit 6 figures. And, you get around people that were making 6 figures in the MLM that, realistically, they just got in earlier than everybody else. But that was always kind of the target. And so I kind of had this expectation that it would feel like, I've made it. I never have to worry about money again. And that is just so faulty. When you hit 6 figures, I think you realize how little 6 figures really is.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest thing for me is I just was like, that this is it. I thought it would feel like more. Um, and it didn't. And it kind of just, I'm grateful for that feeling though, because it kind of pushed me to kind of continue to grow and aspire and to kind of get to that next level and to be like, okay, this is a great milestone, but it's not where I want to be. And I don't want to keep growing. I want to keep building. So I'd say in a nutshell, it was a nice feeling, but a little underwhelming.
Well, you also have big aspirations, big dreams, and so when you hit that level, you were probably like, okay, cool, what's next? You know,
Yeah,
what's the next step? So that's a good thing too, though. Well, hey, look, Christian, I've enjoyed talking to you. I always try to keep it fairly bite-sized for my audience. They're probably mostly new agents out there trying to hustle. So, hey, we'll talk again soon. Maybe you can have me on your show, but I appreciate you coming
absolutely.
on.
Hey, well, thanks, Kenny. Appreciate it.